Welcome to the Reset Mantra. I'm your host, Sabina Maharjan. This podcast aims to support your journey in resetting your mind, body, and soul by sharing insightful stories and conversations with experts and guests from diverse backgrounds. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Reset Mantra with me, Sabina Maharjan. My guest today is a relationship educator and founder of Community Rising, a Dubai-based community that helps women create more meaningful relationships. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sarah Boutros. Sarah, a very warm welcome and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here and chat to you today.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So, Sarah, we talked about this a little bit off camera. Relationships are, one of the most impactful and significant part of our lives. And we as human beings are social creatures and wired for connection. There are also many research that has proven how good relationships can keep us happier, healthier, and promotes longevity of life. However, they can also bring some grief in our life. So I'm really interested to dive a little bit deeper in the context of relationships with ourselves and also with relationship with other people in societal context. But to kickstart, could you tell us a little bit about why is this a subject of interest for you and when did you decide to become a relationship educator?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the answer to my question is kind of in your introduction. Like, our relationships are one of the biggest areas of our lives, and they are super important. They have the ability to make your life amazing, but they also have the ability to make your life kind of miserable. And I think my journey started on that opposite end of being miserable. I felt super anxious. I was feeling really lonely. I was feeling very disconnected despite having a lot of people in my life. And I really couldn't understand why I felt the way that I did. So when I was growing up, I was just felt really confused about how come I have, like a family that loves me, I have friends all around me, I have men who tell me I'm beautiful and all of these things, but I still just feel depressed and anxious. And because I was so disconnected from other people, and I felt so disconnected from the reason of why I felt so disconnected from other people, I ended up developing a lot of, unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with this feeling. So I ended up like binge eating. I was a massive people pleaser. And I think eventually it just got so bad to the point where I was just like binge eating on chocolate every night. And I was like, I need to figure out what is wrong. And I honestly just thought that something was wrong with me. Like I thought, oh, I have mental health problems and that's why I don't feel okay. And that's why I have, this binge eating problem. But when I started doing some work on myself and going to therapy, what I started realizing is that the binge eating was a symptom of something that was happening in my life. And it was that my relationships made me feel so unfulfilled. And that's why I was depressed. So it wasn't that I was too depressed to enjoy my relationships. It was that my relationships made me depressed. And it's not necessarily that I was in relationships with like loads of bad people. Because like I said, I had a family that loved me and I had friends all around me. But it was more that the relationship that I had with myself stopped me from being able to, first of all, be present and enjoy the relationships that I had in my life, because I had so much of my own like trauma and insecurities and stuff, which I projected into my relationships. But I also had a lot of resentment around my past and my life with my family, the way that I kind of processed the things that happened and what I made them mean about, myself and my family. And so I wasn't able to really even receive the love that I had from my very loving and supportive family. So when I started realizing this, And then also looking at the way that, these issues that I was holding on to in myself were also making me end up in relationships with people that were not right for me. Some of them were toxic in the way that, people didn't treat me very well, but some of them were also toxic in the way that they were quite one-sided, or that I felt like I required to sacrifice myself to keep that relationship going. So having all these realizations and going on this journey of going to therapy, I did a couple of plant medicine journeys as well. I worked with a lot of coaches, and then I just started seeing how peeling back the layers of the things that were happening within myself then started changing the quality of the relationships that I had in my life. So the people in my life were changing, and the way that I felt towards people that were in my life already was also changing, because I was changing and I was removing some of that stuff that I was projecting. And, when I learned about how this relationship that I had with myself, with my past, was so powerful in changing my environment, that was kind of the catalyst to getting me into doing this work. I felt really inspired by my own transformation, that I started a community of women, 2,000 women in Dubai, helping them create a better relationship with themselves and helping them make more meaningful relationships with others. And I coached a lot of women one-on-one, helping them to increase their confidence, helping them to work through their stuff. And now it's kind of just gone a little bit more into, it is definitely still about the relationship you have with yourself, but I'm also focusing more about the relationships that you have in your life, and this, how you can gain the skills and the tools that you need to create healthier relationships in general, including the one that you have with yourself. So that's kind of been the, what do you call it, the journey to getting to where I am today. Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing. I think there are many things that you said which are really powerful and empowering, especially as a woman. And a couple of things that I really, really resonated was, how you talked about projecting certain things onto other people, but then you kind of went back, went inwards to kind of really work through your relationship with yourself. And then you mentioned how when you changed your relationship with yourself and did the inner work, through therapy and other concepts, it kind of shifted and changed the relationship externally. I really think that's so powerful. And I was telling you a little bit about this off camera as well. It's easy to blame other people for what happened to you or what's happening in your life, but then it takes a lot of courage, actually. It takes a lot of courage to say, okay, let's look inwards and see what am I not doing right, where am I lacking, and let's work on myself, and to take yourself as that project and heal yourself, work through the issues. And I think that's a very powerful shift, where you really have the power and control in your hand, because you're changing yourself for good. So I think it's a really, really powerful thing to just kind of turn inwards and love yourself, and that kind of have that ripple effect externally, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, just curious to know, so sometimes, like, even after significant healing, now let's say when you get into a relationship, sometimes those old trigger or old patterns may come up, right? How do you manage, or how can someone manage when even after you're healed, and I'm still learning about the concept of healing. I don't know when it stops. It looks like it's a lifelong journey.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. It's a
Yeah.
continuous process. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it's continuous process. And, even though if we have probably, if one has thought, okay, I'm healed and I can better understand my emotions, manage it, and handle and my responses, or how I respond to certain situations and people, we still may have certain triggers or old patterns that may show up, right? How can someone manage those triggers when they arise in their relationships?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it really is a combination of things. So if you know that you have a pattern that leans towards a certain trigger, let's say, for example, you have a core wound of I'm not good enough, and you know that you have that, and it comes up even more when you enter a relationship because it always will, then you have to ask yourself, what are the things that you are doing for yourself in order to start moving out of that belief system? So it's about working on your belief system about yourself, but also learning how to regulate your emotions. Because I think the hardest part about a trigger is that the emotion is so charged. And when you are in that state of a really heightened charged state of like you want to react, and you want to react in a way that maybe you're not going to feel very proud of because it's coming from that wounded place. It's about being able to be with yourself in that heavily charged moment and start to bring your nervous system into a baseline of safety. And so instead of reacting in a way where you want to rely on what you say to someone else or what you do in a circumstance, like let's say, for example, you don't feel you're good enough. So you're worried that your partner is cheating on you. And your immediate response to that would be, okay, I need to text them to see where they are, or I need to call them 50 times to find out where they are, or I need to scroll on their Instagram and I need to see if they are with any other women right now. So that is the reaction that you would have from the trigger. And instead of doing that, you would instead look at it as an opportunity to bring that safety in yourself before you decide on what to take as the next step. So nervous system regulation is the best way to do this. When you feel yourself getting charged, coming back into your body, trying not to get lost in the storyline of the emotion that is being created by the belief system that you're having. And just seeing that feeling as an energy that is coming through you and focusing on that energy and how that energy feels in your body. So, you could focus on the sensations. Where is it coming up? How strong does it feel? Does it have a texture? Is it sharp? Is it painful in your chest, in your head? And then when you start focusing on your body, then you're not focusing on the story, which usually ends up over exaggerating and taking you over the edge and causing you to do something that you don't want to do. So once you see that emotion as an energy, you can start bringing your breath into your body to calm down that energy that you're feeling, to shift that energy from your body. So like breathing in for 4 counts, holding your breath for 4 counts, and then like slowly exhaling for 4 counts repeatedly until you feel more calm, right? So once you get rid of that charge, then you're able to think about things a bit more logically in your head. And you can become aware of the thought process that led you to get that triggered. And then you can say, okay, what feeling is behind this thinking process that I'm having that is causing me to spiral out of control? I feel anxious. Okay, what am I anxious about? I'm anxious that this person's going to cheat on me. What does it mean if they're going to cheat on me? It means that I'm not good enough. Okay, so like what is it that is making you feel unworthy? And what can you do for yourself to start building that self-worth for yourself so that you're not projecting that onto situations in your relationship? And to be honest, nobody teaches us how to build self-worth. So I understand that it's not just something like that you might be able to think about. But some of the things that you can do if you're in that specific scenario is be like, okay, what are some of the things that I am doing in my life that make me feel proud of the person that I am? And if you're not doing anything in your life that makes you feel proud of who you are, then that's where the work begins. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy like, starting a new business or like jumping off an airplane or doing something grand. It can be something as simple as showing up as a very kind human being, giving back to people in your life, like something really simple. And I'm pretty sure that any person who resonates with this kind of feeling can at least recognize that they have good qualities. And it's about really developing that practice of seeing your own value and the good things that you bring into the world.
Mm.
And then it's like, what are the ways that you are showing yourself respect? And what are the ways that you're showing up for yourself? Are you the kind of person who says that they're going to do something and then doesn't follow through with it? Because that breaks self-worth. And are you the kind of person who is looking after your health and looking after your mind and looking after your soul? And if not, then it's like, okay, so that's where the work begins. So I think that's a very specific like situation. But in any case, the nervous system regulation is really important. And I think also thinking about the best case scenario, because no matter what you're getting triggered about, you are thinking about the worst case scenario, right? And that's why you're so emotionally charged, because you think that there's something extremely terrible that is happening in your relationship, or your partner's out to get you, or they're going to leave you, or something is just going to fall apart. So I think because our mind tends to go into negative thinking anyway, habitually, it's kind of developing the skill to recognize that you're doing that and then ask yourself, what are the other circumstances that can also be true in this situation? So, like, if you think that your partner is out to get you, it's like, okay, I'm having this thought and I'm not going to reject it or, throw it away, because that is a feeling that I'm having that is very true. But there's also a lot of different realities that can also be the case. And if you are with someone who is actually a good person who loves you, it's like, okay, so let's say that this person actually does love me and care about me. What could the other scenarios be in this situation? And I think that also helps to bring you back into a level of calm and safety.
Wow, I love it. And I think those were quite a specific detail, I think, which is so helpful in understanding your own triggers and finding the root cause, right? Where they're coming up from. And I loved how you touched on the regulation of nervous system. I think I love that part because I think personally I've been on this journey, if I may say, of just taking myself as a project and looking inwards and seeing, okay, all this negative thinking, the self-talk, which is so habitual, right? How are those conversations that I have with myself impacting the relationship that I have
Yeah.
externally, be it friendships, family, and romantic relationship. And I think it's more about like shifting that perspective of not trying to suppress the emotions and shove it under the carpet, but just really having that courage and braveness to say, okay, where is this emotion of lack or
Mm-hmm.
not being good enough coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it takes a lot of work. And if someone were to ask me a couple of years ago about this, I would probably not have paid that much attention. But now but now that I've experienced certain things in my own life and started to work on myself, and I was telling you off the camera how good it feels when you reach in that state of balance and learning how to deal with the emotions and not needing the external validation, be it from your partner or friends, to reiterate that we are good
Mm-hmm.
enough, because that's
Mm-hmm.
something we kind of build within ourselves. And I loved how you also talked about, especially when we are in a romantic or a long-term relationship, how we tend to lose our identity, but then there's
Mm-hmm.
no significance in maintaining our own identity, right? We are not
Yeah.
someone's a partner, but we have to have our own identity through which we can derive our sense of identity, self-worth. And it's so important to continue that, because in my experience with long-term relationships, it's so easy to forget who we are. And I personally been guilty of not prioritizing on friendships because I was in a romantic relationship and my world kind of revolved around it. And now that I see, I was really looking life through rose-colored glasses. And so all this deep inner healing work that we do, it's so, so empowering. And also, you mentioned about the story that we tell ourselves, right? The story about what happened if our partners not meeting our expectations, what kind of story we're telling ourselves, what kind of self-dialogue or self-talk we're having. And I understood from what I heard, I understood that it's important to look things into right perspective, right? Validate how you feel as well, not to kind of dismiss your own feelings, validate that, accept that, but then also see what could be other good scenarios and not just get hung up in the worst case scenario. Because I think that's the first thing still today I tend to do, like, oh, what if this happens? What if something goes wrong? But but it's easy to think that way as a normal person. What would be some of the key things that determine how healthy our relationship is, or how can we build a healthy relationship, especially in a romantic relationship?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is obviously taking responsibility for the things that you're holding within yourself. And I think it works both ways, right? Not just for you, but to also be with someone who is also taking responsibility for their own shit and working on themselves. Because if you're both making the effort to work on, your past traumas and the ways that maybe you show up in sabotaging ways that hurt the relationship, then things can only improve in that dynamic. Whereas some people, they, first of all, might not even have any awareness. And so they will project that stuff in quite a toxic way into the relationship. Or they just might not be ready to change, but that impacts as well. The second thing that I would say that is absolutely necessary is having somebody that you can communicate with very openly, honestly, and respectfully. And this is something that I've especially seen in my current relationship. Like, because we are both working on ourselves individually, even before we entered the relationship, and we are both having built the skill to communicate with each other, when issues come up in our relationship, it actually becomes a stepping stone towards making our relationship stronger. Because the way that we approach things is that we are on the same team and we want the best for each other. No matter how, upset or triggered that we might be by something that's happened and the way that we've perceived it, we always come together and want to do what's best for the relationship. And the way that we communicate that has been kind of the biggest game changer in making our relationship even more solid and healthy. So developing this skill to communicate and to have open and honest communication about the way that you're feeling is super important. And I mean, what that looks like is to be able to hold space for someone when they're speaking and validate their emotions. So if I tell my partner that something that he's done or he's said has upset me, he's not going to turn around and tell me, oh, I didn't mean it. Like, you're taking it the wrong way. Why are you being sensitive about it? He'll say, oh, okay, I can see that this upset you. I can understand how this upset you. And he will also, be solution orientated. He's not concerned about protecting his ego. He's more concerned about, okay, something's happened. She's upset. I care about her. What are we going to do to move forward? And I think that this is where a lot of people tend to go wrong. Because they get offended when somebody brings up something that's happened. And they think that what it means when somebody brings something up is that they've done something wrong and that they're a bad person. When in actuality, when somebody's coming to you with an issue and they're presenting it to you, they are doing that because they want you to see it and they want you to do something to make that better so that the relationship can repair. Now, like the other side to this coin is that some people don't know how to communicate their feelings in a way that is respectful. And so, you know, if you throw fire at someone, they will, you know, like get defensive. Whereas if you go to someone with open arms, they'll probably feel more relaxed and more open, you know, to open their arms to you as well. So really being able to take responsibility for your feelings when you're talking to someone, and being able to speak from your own perspective instead of pointing blame at somebody for doing something and accusing them of doing certain things. So what that looks like is, let's say, for example, my partner forgot to do something that I asked him to do, or I asked him to call me and he forgot to call me. And then I get really upset. I'm like, he doesn't care about me. You know, I'm telling myself all of these things in my head. And then he comes home and I've been bubbling up for ages. And I'm like, I told you to call me. You didn't call me. You never do what I ask you. You don't care about me. And then that is going to make somebody put their wall up and be like, okay, that's not fair, blah, blah, blah. And then it's not going to get resolved. You're just going to end up in a back and forth fight. So I think, you know, learning to communicate it instead in a way from, hey, I did tell you to call me, and when you didn't, that made me feel really upset. You know, it's a big difference.
I'm not sure how honest should I be because
Honesty is the best policy.
Because, you know, since we talked about, okay, when we find something that's not desirable in a relationship, okay, let's look inwards. I'm looking at myself and I'm thinking, okay, I do admit that I've not been a great communicator in my past relationships. And sometimes I really go back and think, how come, you know, for me in past, I used to think was, okay, if you're just able to talk through what your message is, oh, you're good at communication. But is the other person understanding in a right way? Is the other person receiving it in the same way? Are you communicating the way the other person needs or understands, right? I think so. That's a huge learning that's been significant in my own journey. And I think culturally as well, I'm from Nepal, and you already know. So I feel like culturally, women out there, we're taught to communicate in an indirect way, in a polite and soft way, because often when we are too straightforward, we're called, okay, you're too opinionated, too bossy, too much. So I think it kind of teaches us from our childhood to be a little bit indirect in our communication. And where I'm going with this is, when we get into relationship, I realize that we indirectly communicate what our needs and desires are to our partners. So they're not even able to understand what the ask is. So a question that I'm thinking, right, so let's say when two people are in a relationship, one has done their inner work, their personal development work, is working on healing their past traumas, their conditioning of how their old belief systems were. Let's say one person is on that path and dedicated to improve themselves. However, the other partner is not probably self-aware or willing to change, but they love each other, right? I've seen this kind of dynamics a lot around me and in my own life as well. And it might be a little bit contradicting, because when we say we love someone, it means to unconditionally accept them the way they are, right? But then one may ask, if you really love someone, why would you want them to change? But then here, one's really trying to heal themselves, work on themselves, but then the other person's not self-aware and trying to not change. What would you say to that situation or scenario?
So I think, like, there's a difference between someone who's not self-aware and someone who's not willing to do the work on themselves. Because a lot of people can enter relationships with people who are not self-aware. But if you bring up the things that you're seeing and you say, hey, this is impacting our relationship and I need you to work on it so that we can work on our relationship, some of those people might say yes, and then they might enter therapy and they might make the effort to make the relationship work. But if you're not self-aware and you're not taking the feedback that the way that you're showing up is being destructive to the relationship, then what I would say is that love is not really enough, because at the end of the day, you're in a relationship dynamic that is not serving you. And so, I mean, you can love and admire someone for the positive aspects that they have of themselves, but if they have traits and characteristics that they keep bringing into your life, which are detrimental to your own happiness and your well-being, then like, what are you really doing in that relationship? I think that sometimes the thing that a lot of people can do, and a thing that I've done a lot in my past as well, is that we try and hold on to the positive things and we ignore the red flags. Because we want it to work, because we like those positive things so much. But I guess then you have to ask yourself the question, like, how much of an impact does them not working on themselves have on their relationship? And do you still want to be in that scenario in 5 years' time? Or would you prefer to be with someone who actually takes the initiative and the responsibility for themselves and the relationship to do something to make it work? So
that is so true.
yeah.
I think I can totally relate, you know, how we choose to ignore red flags just because we love someone and we want the relationship to work. But then the question is, how long can that relationship sustain, right? And you know, often this is what I was thinking. Often I've realized that in my experience, we try to derive our sense of self-worth based on how our romantic partner treats us, right? If they say things like, okay, I love you, you look great, positive things about us, then we feel good about ourselves. But then if that's missing, we tend to think, okay, maybe we're not good enough. I know we talked a little bit about not feeling good enough and how it can manifest into our relationships and, you know, triggers us in many ways. And then the other thing is relationships are also often called a mirror to our own self, and it triggers parts in you and shows us what within us we need to heal. Tell me a little bit more about, you know, for those people who derive their sense of self-worth, and this could be for, you know, for any gender, not just women, those people who tend to derive their sense of self-worth through their partner, through their relationship, and how can individuals fix this and develop a healthier sense of self-worth while in a relationship?
Yeah, I think this comes back to a lot of the stuff that we talked about when we were talking about triggers. Really starting to reflect on what it is that you're doing in your life that you feel should make you feel worthy in the first place. Like, what are the things that you are doing in your life that are making you feel proud of yourself? What are the ways that you are showing that you respect yourself and showing up for yourself? And, you know, what are the ways that you're validating yourself? Because if we don't have that practice for ourselves internally, and I'm calling it practice because I don't think that anyone is born with it, then we will always outsource it to somebody else. So it's about learning to validate yourself. It's about learning to show up for yourself, take care of your health, take care of your body, you know, go to therapy, take care of your mind, surround yourself with good people. All of these things help you build your self-worth, doing things that make you feel proud of yourself, being a good person, and intentionally choosing on a day-to-day basis to focus on that. So like one of the ways that you can do that, and this is one of the things that I did when I was really struggling with low self-worth, is I had a daily journaling practice, and I would list minimum 5 things that I was appreciating about myself or valuing about myself. So it could have been anything like today I felt like I was a really good friend because, you know, someone was struggling and I was there for them. I felt like I showed up as a, you know, a good person because I donated this to charity or whatever. And just general characteristics like I did something that was really scary and I was proud of myself for doing that. These little things, these little wins, celebrating them on a daily basis is the way that you build your self-worth. But also the things that you want to hear from other people is that how can you start giving those things to yourself? And I'm not going to say that, you know, that you should be the only source of your self-worth, because I think human nature is that we do also gain our self-worth based on the interactions and the experiences that we have happen in our lives. But when you do those things for yourself, your sense of self-worth and what other people think of your self-worth does not become as fragile as, let's say, if you didn't have that foundation that you built for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like what we were talking about earlier, it's so important to maintain your own life outside of that relationship and find things that make you really happy, things that you're passionate about doing. If you don't know what that is, then like try everything and try it for long enough to see, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, those are the things I would say. Those are the key things. And speaking to yourself like you would speak to someone that you really do love and care about. And this is probably one of the most powerful practices that I've used both with myself and with people that I've coached. It's because we find it usually so easy to be compassionate and kind and encouraging to everyone around us. But then when it comes to ourselves, we're extremely judgmental. We're so critical. We place these unrealistic expectations that we would never put on anyone else. So again, this one I really like doing, and by journaling. So you can spend like 10 minutes a day just kind of brain dumping on a piece of paper all of the judgmental things, the insecure things that are running through your mind about yourself, and then just kind of reading back on it and asking yourself, like, what would I say if someone that I really cared about was saying those things about themselves? And then learning how to respond to your own thoughts with that compassionate voice then helps you to start cultivating that sort of relationship with yourself.
That's also beautiful. And I personally love journaling. I think I've replaced, I haven't been to therapy, maybe one session, but I sort of replaced therapy with journaling.
Yeah.
And I've been journaling ever since I was a kid, but I wasn't intentional about why I was journaling. It was just a medium for me to express my thoughts. In recent times, I've started to be really mindful about journaling, just like you said, just brain dump everything at the end of the night. I think that's been most powerful, and in the morning for sure. And just be able to uh, download all those thoughts and see it in paper. And when I read, I I get amazed that the kind of self-talk that I have with myself. And then you said it's so right that when we talk to a friend, we are such a cheerleader and we are there to root for themselves and focus on all the good things. But how come when it comes to ourselves, we're so critical, so self-critical, and look for what's wrong with us versus focusing and amplifying what's the good side? So I think it's very empowering, how journaling can have so much positive impact in overcoming, or maybe just to start with being self-aware about what kind of thoughts we're having and how it's making us feel. And so to change how we feel, maybe change our thoughts. So that's been my mantra of life, as to, okay, if you want to change how you feel, change how you think. And to change how you think, you really have to be self-aware and mindful of what you're thinking, right? I recently listened to one of Dr. Joe Dispenza's video, and when he talked about relationship, he says, okay, take out a piece of paper, write down all the qualities you would like to see in an ideal partner, and then become that, period. So I feel like that when there's a lot of expectations attached to a relationship, it can make us miserable because, we're looking for certain things and we may not be able to find it, or may not be able to find it through our relationship. What do you think about that, having expectations in a relationship?
I mean, it's a very broad term, expectations, but it comes back to what you said, like where are the what kind of place are the expectations coming from? Like, is it coming from your wounded place that you need to fill that pain and anxiety from your internal state with expectations that you're placing on somebody else to do that for you? Or are the expectations coming from a place of you valuing yourself and knowing what you want to feel happy and fulfilled in a relationship? So I think that having expectations is really healthy, because you set the standard for what you want. If you're being disappointed by the fact that you can't ever find the things that you're expecting, then, I mean, depends how long you've been looking for. If you've had certain expectations for like 5 years and you're not finding anyone that even meets remotely those expectations, then maybe you have to ask yourself if those expectations are realistic or not. But no, I think that expectations are super important. Expectations and standards. I did an Instagram post about this the other day. But there's research that shows that couples that set expectations and standards in their relationships are just infinitely more happier in their relationships, because there's a benchmark to work towards. But on the other hand of things, like I don't believe that you should expect to meet someone who meets all of your expectations right away, because I don't think that there ever is such a thing as a perfect person or a perfect partner. But I do believe that you can meet someone who meets most of your expectations and is a really good person and has shared values, and you're attracted to them and all these things. And then you either work on the other expectations being met, or there's compromise somewhere in the middle.
It sounds like, from our conversation, the whole main goal is to become that whole person first. And then so you're able to attract the people with the similar mindset, and then you come into this more harmonious relationship, right? And then have a great communication, and through which you can solve or resolve any conflicts and just continue to meet each other's expectations and continue to grow.
For sure, yeah.
What is one practice or habit that has been essential in helping you stay aligned with your true self?
One. I can think of two. I don't know which one to share.
You can say two, because I like you, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm so bad at making decisions, so this is really helpful. So I'd say the first one is I have kind of like a goal tracker in my journal that I visit almost every day. And it's basically, I set goals that are aligned to the things that I really value in my life. And I use this goal tracker every day to make sure that I am acting in alignment with those things that really matter to me on a daily basis. So some of my examples are like meditating, doing yoga, exercising, learning. And yeah, I mean, knowing that I am investing time into doing these things every single day helps me to kind of stay centered and aligned to the person that I am and the things that I value. And I think the second thing is that practice of being compassionate, because when you are compassionate to yourself, you are able to kind of drop some of these expectations and things that you think that you should be doing or the way that you should be. And you really just allow yourself to show up authentically as you are right now, even if it's not perfect, even if it's messy. That compassion really helps.
I love it. Yes, I totally agree with the meditation to stay centered and make sure you're, aligned with your with your goals, and compassion is so important thing. I think it seems like they're pretty simple, but those are the tough things to realize in life. And it took me 30 years or plus to realize, okay, all the things that you look externally is within you, and meditation helped me to unlock those things. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
powerful.
Well, this has been so great, Sarah. Before I let you go, is there anything that I may not have asked about relationship, but you think it's important for people to understand in general?
Honestly, I think we covered everything. Like the three key things that I would say is like the relationship that you have to yourself and your past and your emotions, and like having the skill to communicate openly and honestly about things. I'd say they're the biggest things.
I love it. Yes. Well, Sarah, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you spending the time. I'm going to put some of the links in the show notes below so people can find out more about you and connect with you further. But thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you for joining me this week on The Reset Mantra. I am Sabina Maharjan. Join me again next week, and in the meantime, please subscribe and leave me a review. If you have someone who you think will be great on the show, please get in touch and find me and the podcast on Instagram at I am Sabina Maharjan and at The Reset Mantra. I'm so looking forward to next week, and I'll catch you then.